So in the art world, when we're talking about shading, the term that is used to describe shading is called value. Value refers to how dark or how light something is. There's no reason to memorize values. It's better to know what one value is and then work your way up or down. I find that much easier when I'm drawing. So if we look at this chart, this has pure black labeled as 10 and it has pure white labeled as 0. 10 could also be referred to as a very low value. 1 could be referred to as a very high value. 5 could be considered a medium value. 3 could be considered a medium high value, and 8 could be considered a medium low value. Those are the terms we use when describing value. Alright, in class number 3, we started going over shading. So to start with, we're going to use 3 pencils. I've got an H, a 2B, and a 6B. And we're going to use these 3 pencils to do a box of values. So what I had everyone do is sketch a rectangle on a piece of paper. It looks like that's a little light on camera, so I'm gonna go a little darker just so you all can see this. But I want to strip like this and then divide it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to shade each one a different value. Dark down here, light up here. And let's just label them. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now your 6B is your darkest pencil, so let's go ahead and we're going to definitely do this one in a 6B. And our lightest pencil is an H, so let's have this one do an H. And then right here in the middle, this will be a 2B. So what we're going to do is we're going to have each pencil is going to do 2 boxes. And what I want is a gradual transition going from dark to light. So each box is going to look a little bit lighter. Now since these are both 6B, you're going to have to do one darker than the other. There are a couple of ways to get a dark value out of a pencil. The first way is to press really hard and make sure you get every little bit of the paper covered. And note when you're shading, it's easier to use the side of the pencil than the point. Dull pencils usually work better than sharp pencils when you're shading. Now if you're like me and you don't really like pushing very hard, then another thing you can do is to simply lighten the pressure on your pencil, and then if it's not dark enough, go over it again. So now I'm going to switch pencils. I'm going to go to the 2B, and I'm going to do the same thing. And the point of this exercise is to get you acquainted with the different pencils to see what you can do with them. It's also going to help you get used to using pressure and how much pressure to use. It's also going to help you gauge the different values between pencils. I'm going to do this one a little lighter, so I'm just doing a little bit lighter pressure. Good. Now I'm going to go to my H. And then I'm just going to do just a little bit on the first one. So now I'm going to look this over and just make sure it looks pretty good. The 3 and the 2 to me look very similar, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to my 2B and just try and darken the 3 up just a bit. And then if I get it too close to 4, then I'm going to come back over here to 4 and make it a little darker. That looks better to me. Now if for some reason you make one of these too dark, don't forget you have your kneaded eraser. You can go ahead and lighten an area if you've gone too dark. For the next exercise, I want you to do another chart, but this time don't put the separator lines on it. Just do a nice long rectangle like this. And now we're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to take the 6B, get the first one nice and dark, then go right next to it and go a little lighter. Then we're going to switch pencils. We're going to go to the 2B. Same thing, we're just doing the exact same thing. And then very light on the end. Okay, now we're going to introduce the blending stick. A good use of the blending stick is to gently blend in these areas where the values meet up. And the best way to get acquainted with a blending stick is to simply use it. Now, because I'm starting in this dark area, I have a lot of very dark graphite on this. So if I go into this area here, it's going to bring that dark with it. So that's something to think about when you're blending. You usually have to wipe these off a lot. I'll use either a paper towel or my pant leg. So I'm just going to fix what I just did, because I did not want that dark. And that should be a lesson to let you know that it's sometimes better to start in the lighter areas and then work into your darks. So with that being said, let me go over here, and I'm just trying to smooth out this region between these two values. And then I'm going to work my way across. And just know that you don't always have to use blending sticks for your drawings. If you want to do soft blending, you can use tissue. You can use your finger. However, using your finger, you will transfer some of the oils from your finger to the paper. Or you don't have to use any sort of blending method at all. You can just use your pencils. So that is something I did forget to mention in class, that it is more beneficial to work from your lights to your darks when it comes to using a blending stick. Now, if you don't want to use a blending stick, let me put a value right here. This is my 6B. I'm going to put a nice dark value here. It's all nice and solid. Now let's say I want to go a little lighter. Then I'm just going to work this edge and gradually lighten my pressure on the pencil as I go. And notice I did like a column, then moved over, did a column, then moved over and did a column. This helps me regulate the pressure a little better. And then I can keep fine-tuning it with my pencil as I go. And then if I want to switch, here I'll go ahead and switch to my 2B. And I will overlap what I just did and start to bring that value out further. So this is another method for blending values if you don't want to use a blending stick. Now I'm going to use the H. And again, I'm overlapping. I'm starting back here and I'm bringing that value out. So the last exercise that I want you to do with values is to take a 2B and again just draw out a little chart, just a little rectangle like we did before, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did up here, but this time we're only going to use one pencil. We're going to use the 2B all the way through, and then so you want to go dark to light from here to here, but you only want to use pencil pressure. You're not going to switch pencils. So I'm going to get this area nice and dark, do a couple passes, get it nice and solid, and then I'm going to start pushing towards the other side. And then I'm going to start lightening my pressure a bit as I go. And the whole while I'm watching to see what value is going onto the paper and judging if I need to lighten my pressure. And I'm just trying to make sure that everything looks nice and smooth. Very light pressure here at the end. And if I want, I can use my blending stick on that as well, but I kind of like how that came out. I'm happy with this. After you've done these three, you should decide which one you like doing the most. I personally like doing this one. However, sometimes I do like to switch pencils, so I kind of use a combination of all of them. I like to use one pencil for most of it, but if I need to get darker or I need to get lighter, I will have a few different pencils on hand just to make my drawing a little easier. Alright, let's talk about some other shading terms. So this right here represents a light source. The first thing that I want to point out on a sphere is what's called the core shadow or the terminator line. And this is a very specific landmark. And what this does is it separates the object into a dark side and a light side. Now the light side is generally referred to as halftone. That's the name that is used to describe the light side of a form. There is also a highlight region, and that's going to be the region that is directly facing the light. It is receiving the most light. Now halftone can be further subdivided. You can have light halftone and you can have dark halftone. As you can see here, the halftone starts to get a little bit darker, or it goes down in value as it gets closer to the core shadow. On some objects that are able to reflect light, you will sometimes find what's called a specular highlight. Now in the core shadow region, you will sometimes have a little bit lighter area, and that is referred to as reflected light. The most important thing to know about reflected light when you see it is that reflected light should never be as bright as anything in your halftone region. It needs to stay dark. Now because this is a three-dimensional object, light cannot pass through it. It hits the front face, but it can't hit anything behind it. So what happens is you get what's called a cast shadow. And the last term you should know is the soft region between the cast shadow and the light surface, and that's called a penumbra.
Positioning a light directed at the sphere will give us a light side and a dark side. Imagine the sphere as a globe, and its poles are located on the direct center path of the light. The equator will be the boundary line between light and dark, or the terminator line. How do we shade the area between these two? The most obvious way would be to create bands of parallel ovals that match the shape of the equator, but get progressively smaller as they head to the pole. And doesn't it seem like we could just use a value scale and make each band equal percentages from dark to light? I mean, it looks okay. Value variance as a surface turns away from the light is not linear. At a 0-degree angle, we will have 100% brightness. At a 90-degree angle, we have 0% brightness. At an 80-degree angle, we have 45% brightness. Here are the numbers. In physics, this phenomenon is represented by Lambert's cosine law. What this means to us as artists is that we need to shade our spheres with very little value change in the light area until we get closer to the terminator. See the difference? How about the edge of the cast shadow? Should it be a soft edge or a hard edge? That will depend on how close the object is to the surface receiving the shadow and also the size of the light. Since the sphere is resting on a surface, its shadow edge will be quite sharp, whereas if the sphere were up in the air, further from the surface, its cast shadow edge would be softer. To better illustrate this principle, here is the sun, here is a platform, and here is the ground. A line from the outer edge of the sun to the edge of the platform will show us where the shadow boundary edge is. A line from the other side of the sun to the platform edge will show us where the fully lit area ends. The region between these two boundary edges is called the penumbra. a gradual transition between dark and light. This is the soft edge of a shadow. Notice how it gets bigger or smaller depending on how far away the platform is from the ground. And also notice how it changes depending on the size of the light source. The light obviously can't bounce off the area where the shadow exists. It can only bounce off the light areas. After the light bounces, it loses much of its intensity. So the area of the sphere with the least amount of shadow nearby will receive the most reflected light. The light can't reach around to the back, so it dissipates into shadow. The last item of business is the specular highlight. If a surface is reflective enough, the light source will be reflected off of it. The position of the specular highlight is located at a point on the surface where the angle between it and the light source is the same as the angle between it and the viewer's eye.
Last week I talked about perspective. This is going to come into play this week as well. You're going to need a horizon line, and then I'm going to put my sphere right here. And then I'm going to erase that horizon line right through there. So how do I figure out where the cast shadow goes? Well, first, before we get into the perspective part of it, let's look at 3 examples. I'm going to draw 3 spheres, and then I'm going to plot my light source. I'm going to say it's here, and I'm going to put it the same for every sphere. We're looking at a 2-dimensional piece of paper, so we can't judge depth. We can't tell if this light is right next to this sphere, if it is more towards us shooting back, or if it's behind the sphere shooting light this way. So that's something you have to decide. Let's look at a light that is directly to the side of this sphere. The way you calculate the core shadow and the cast shadow is you can draw a construction line with the light going right towards the center of this sphere. Okay, now I'm going to draw a perpendicular line to this light guide, and I'm going to do it right through the center of the sphere, like this. That would be my core shadow. I can go ahead and shade this. And now anyone who sees this is going to know that the light source is directly to the side. Now, if the light was coming closer to us, it's in front of this sphere and it's shooting the light back like this, we do the same thing. We draw a line right through the center like this, and then we do a perpendicular line right through the center like this. But now, instead of having a straight line as our core shadow, now we're going to come just behind this pole. Imagine these as poles on a globe. Come just behind it and do a curve right to the other side, just behind this one. And now shade this in. This gives the illusion that the light is more in front of us. Now this last example, again, do the same thing. A line right through the center, and then perpendicular, cut it in half. Only this time, instead of coming on this side of the poles, you're going to come on this side of the poles. And this time, come a little bit further this way as your start, and just a little bit further this way. And then you can shade all this in. So that's how you determine your core shadow. Now what about the cast shadow? Well, from the side it's very easy. We're going to draw a straight line from one side of the light source to one side of the sphere. Just go ahead and sketch in a line. Do it nice and straight. If you need a ruler, you could use a ruler as well. I'm just going to sketch this in. And then on the other side, sketch that over to the other side. And then we're going to draw a line that's parallel with this horizon line right underneath the sphere. We're going to go like this. It's going to stop at this construction line, this light ray that you made, and it's going to stop at this one that you made. And if you want to do the penumbra, then what you do is take this side and connect it to this edge. And where it strikes, this whole region here is going to be your penumbra. And same here. You're going to draw one from this side of the light over to here. And not going to be much of a penumbra there. So you might have a little bit of softness right there. But not in the front. They're too close together. So that'll be pretty sharp right there. And then it's going to be a little soft like that. So notice how the cast shadow is parallel with the horizon. That tells us, again, that this light source is directly to the side of this sphere. So how do we plot that if the light source is coming towards us? Well, if it's coming towards us, it's not the cast shadow is not going to be going this way, right? It's not going to be going sideways because that's with the light to the side. It's coming towards us. So as it comes towards us, the shadow is going to push in this direction here. So all we need to do is imagine a center line under this sphere, and it's not going to be right on the edge. We got to push it a little bit in because this has width. So we kind of guess. Let's push it in a little bit, and then let's kind of just draw a line, find one that looks pretty good, that is not going this way, it's slanted this way a bit. So I'm just going to draw a construction line right here and take it all the way to the horizon. And once we hit the horizon, let's make a little mark. There's our vanishing point. I can take a line from the edge of the light and run it right to the edge of the sphere, and where it ends, that's where my cast shadow ends, right there. Same as this one, bring it here like this, bring it to this one, there's where my cast shadow ends. And then if I want to do a penumbra, bring the other side of the light source to the edge, bring it over here like this. So we'll have a little bit of a penumbra there, it'll be a little bit soft there, do the same up here. We already found from this one, these two are almost identical, so we don't need a penumbra up there. We're going to have a shadow with a little bit of penumbra on the back end. Now, as far as the width of this shadow, we can still use this vanishing point. You got to kind of guess. I'm going to go ahead and bring it just to the edge of this sphere right here, and then a little bit on the other side as well. And then I'm going to use these guides to help me plot in the cast shadow. I'm going to go from this point here to this point here, and then all that under there is my cast shadow. And then I can make this a little softer back here if I want that penumbra in there. And it's kind of hard to see there, but what I'm doing is I have this oval or this ellipse. This is like we're looking down on it. And this is all black, this is all dark. And then I have another ellipse going around it, but it kind of disappears into the beginning like this. So it looks like this. And then all this is a little softer right through here. And then that's a really good opportunity to come in here and soften this up a bit. You could, I'm going to go ahead and just go right around like that and soften it like that. For the last one, we're going to do the same thing. Since the side is going sideways, the light in front is going back like this, then the light behind is going to cause it not to go this way and not to go this way, but it's actually going to come this way. Now the horizon hits about right here, so I'm going to have like my little vanishing point right there. And from there, I can kind of guess that that shadow is going to come under like this, and then out like this. And then let's figure out, this is actually going to be a very long cast shadow, I can already tell, simply because the light's so low. When the light's low like that, it's going to cast this really, really long cast shadow that's actually going to come out to here like this. So in that sense, I'm going to run out of paper, but I just know that my sphere is going to have a really long shadow like this. It'll probably run off the paper, so I'll just go ahead and soften that edge. Just soften that back edge like that. So use your penumbra lines. You can use 4 penumbra lines to determine your cast shadow and your penumbra. And then use perspective. Use a vanishing point on the horizon and a couple perspective lines to help you figure out where that cast shadow is going to lay underneath your object. So now with that being said, go ahead and draw a sphere. Give yourself a horizon line. I want you to decide where your light source is going to be. You can choose from any of these that I've already done, or you can just choose your own. And then go ahead and plot your core shadow. Go ahead and shade the core shadow. Give it a little bit of reflected light. And usually the easiest way to do that is after you shade in your core shadow, you could just take your eraser and just lighten up one region and then just kind of shade over it again. Just so it's a little bit lighter in the front and darker in the back. Make sure the back of that sphere, especially in this sort of lighting setup, is really dark, because your reflected light isn't going to get back here. It's going to be more up towards the front of that core shadow. Like that. So again, determine your light source. Determine your core shadow. Go ahead and shade in your core shadow. Add some reflected light. Shade your halftone region. Pay attention to the inclination angle, meaning keep most of it that's facing the light towards the light and don't let it start to drop off dark until it gets close to that terminator line. Then use perspective and a vanishing point to help you calculate where your cast shadow is going to go, and then use some penumbra lines to calculate if your shadow is going to have penumbra. And if it does, then go ahead and add the penumbra and make it nice and soft. And then the last thing I talked about in class was using a reference photo. When you're using a reference photo, it's important to analyze it and determine where your different value boundaries are. So where does one value stop and another one start? Now, one thing I forgot to mention in class is if you're having trouble locating these boundaries, these value boundaries on a reference image, one thing you can try doing is squinting your eyes. When you squint your eyes, it makes all the details go away, and sometimes it makes it easier to see the distinct boundaries between values. So give that a try. So if I have some hair, let's just say I've got this little region of hair right here. And then right through here, there's some areas of the hair that are not black. And then I've got this jaw that comes down like this. And then I can see this region on her cheek. It's almost like a diamond, like an out of focus diamond shape. So I'm just going to put that right there for now, just so I know where that is. Another thing I'm going to look at is on this jaw. It looks like, when I analyze, it looks like there's a boundary line that comes down like this on the jaw. This is darker. And then it looks like it kind of does this. There's another region that I'm seeing that kind of goes like this. And this goes like that. And this comes around like that. So if I can see these boundaries, I want to try and put them where they need to be on my line drawing. So this is going to make my job easier. So then I know this is going to be dark. This is black. This would also be a good opportunity to use my charcoal pencil, because charcoal is pure black, whereas this is graphite. This is only going to be a dark gray. But for now, this is fine. I'm not going to do any charcoal in this demonstration, but just know that you can. And notice how I'm trying, especially with black, notice how I'm trying to get all the white of the paper covered. I don't want any white showing through when I'm doing black. And notice I haven't done any details up in here. I save all my detailing for last. Right now I'm just blocking in. I'm just determining where all my values are going to go. So there's my dark. So I used a 6B on that. Now I'm going to go to my 2B, and I'm going to go to this region here because I can see when I analyzed the drawing earlier that this wasn't black, but it was dark. So this makes it easy for me to judge this value. I'm not trying to get it perfect like the photo. I'm trying to get it to where it looks correct next to the black. I still want the black to be nice and dark. I don't want this to be as dark as that black. So then once I'm happy with that, I can keep using the same pencil and just lighten my pressure, but I know that this region is going to be a little bit lighter than this one. So I'm going to shade this region, and I'm going to try and make it just a little bit lighter. And I may have to do a few passes. This is a very light pass, and I can tell it's not dark enough, but I'm going to go over it again. And right where this meets up with this other region, I'm going to try and finesse this edge a little bit so that they blend together. Rather than using a blending stick, I'm going to just use my pencil to try and get a nice blend right there. Now up here it gets a little lighter. I'm going to go ahead and switch to my H pencil since I have it here. And this region, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to start a little light because I'd rather go too light than too dark when I'm putting these values in. Because it's really easy to go back over it and make it darker. It's a little tougher when you got to erase. You can erase, but it's just easier to do it this way. So notice my pressure is not that high. This is probably too light. But now that I have that in, now I'm going to start finessing this edge. See if I can't get this to blend better into this new value. So now I've got a progression. I've got a transition going from dark to medium to light. And then this area is dark again. It doesn't look as dark as this bottom region. It looks more like this region right here. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my 2B. And then I'm going to color this region in. And notice the quality of the edge. You can't really see the edge in this reference photo. So it's important that I make this edge very soft. So I'm going to finesse that edge a little bit and try and make it nice and soft so it's not a hard edge. And then from there, I'm going to try and go from here dark and then lighten up as I come up to this edge here. And I'm just going to try and do this using pressure as opposed to changing pencils. So then if I was going to blend, I'm going to start in this light area and just kind of get this whole area smoothed out. And then once I get that all kind of smoothed out, then I'm going to push out into the darker regions. And you kind of have to smooth out the whole region if you're going to use blending sticks. Otherwise it becomes too noticeable, the areas that are blended and the areas that aren't. Then go into that dark region. Get that all nice and smoothed out and then bring it back out. Another thing I can do with the blending stick is even though I haven't shaded up here, I can push this graphite around a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and push this up into this region. And see, I've still got graphite on the end of my blending stick, so I can still use that to rough in this region of her eye right through here. So the one bad thing about graphite is you'll notice that it has a very harsh glare to it at certain angles. You don't get that problem with charcoal. However, with charcoal, you can't really do soft grays with charcoal. And some people find it easier with blending sticks to only push. So if you're working in a region of dark, they find that they have more control if they just push out and away from the region that you're working on. Like this. So this is a little bit more tedious, but know that this is a way to get maybe a little bit smoother results, because what happens is if you go back and forth like this, notice how there's some regions that are a little darker on the edges because you're going back and forth. So you go one way, then you change direction, and where you change direction, it leaves a little bit more graphite on there. So that's why some people don't prefer to go back and forth like this. You know, some people will do circles as well. And that's how you would go in and try and work out those regions that maybe are a little darker. So little circles are helpful. Those get a nice smooth result. But also know that doing it like this as well. Although I find right here, since I already did it one way, to help smooth that out, I can go through and do these little circles. If I'm going for a smoother result, where I don't want it kind of, right now it's a little bit blotchy because I was just kind of all over the place going back and forth. So know that you have different methods available to you with blending sticks.